The courtroom was silent, except for the soft clicking of camera shutters from the crowd of reporters gathered in the back. The tension in the room was thick enough to slice with a knife. The judge, an older man with a sharp gaze and graying hair, adjusted his glasses, glancing down at the paperwork in front of him. A soft gavel tap broke the silence, signaling the start of what was sure to be an explosive moment. "Mr. Musk," the judge said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of authority, "you've been found guilty of multiple violations. The fine you're being assessed is $50 million. The words echoed through the courtroom, and a murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Elon Musk, the billionaire genius behind Tesla and SpaceX, the man known for defying the odds and reshaping industries, sat motionless in his seat. His face remained neutral, almost unbothered, despite the gravity of the situation. His eyes, intense and calculating, locked on the judge's, seemingly unfazed by the hefty fine or the media frenzy surrounding him. Outside the courtroom, reporters were scrambling, microphones thrust forward as they whispered about the implications of this case. A fine this large could damage the image of anyone. But this wasn't just anyone. This was Elon Musk, the innovator, the disruptor, the man who had rewritten the rules of business, science, and even space travel. The idea that Musk could be publicly humiliated like this seemed impossible to many. Yet, here he was, facing a fine that could shatter his empire. Musk leaned forward slightly, his fingers laced together, elbows resting on the edge of the table. He took a slow breath, and in that moment, he seemed to weigh every possible outcome with a sharpness only he possessed. The room waited for his response, his next move, as if they all sensed there was more to this than just a fine. Musk's reputation, his persona as a problem solver, a man who could defy the odds, was on the line. "Mr. Musk," the judge continued, breaking through the silence again, "do you have anything to say for yourself before I finalize the ruling?" The words hung in the air, and for a moment, it felt like the entire room was holding its breath. The judge seemed stern, his expression hard to read, but Musk's eyes twinkled with something much more dangerous, intelligence. Musk smiled, a slight curve at the corner of his lips, and his gaze never wavered from the judge. His composure was unnerving. Anyone else would be pleading or strategizing, trying to find an escape route. But Musk? He just sat there, the picture of calm. "Your Honor," Musk's voice was steady, almost casual, like he was discussing a business deal rather than a multi-million-dollar fine. "I appreciate your decision, but there's something you might have overlooked." The words hung in the air, drawing every eye in the room to him. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but still maintaining his authoritative stance. Musk leaned back in his chair, his expression still unreadable. The reporters, sensing something big was about to happen, leaned in closer, their cameras capturing every flicker of emotion on his face. "What do you mean, Mr. Musk?" the judge asked, a hint of skepticism in his voice. "Well," Musk began, adjusting his cuffs, his calm demeanor unshaken by the pressure, "I've reviewed the case thoroughly, and I believe there's a discrepancy in how the fine was assessed. It's not just about the fine. It's about the principles behind it. You see, the law allows for certain contingencies in these types of cases, and I intend to use those contingencies to my advantage." The courtroom was now on edge. What was he talking about? Musk wasn't denying the fine, but he wasn't exactly accepting it either. In a courtroom full of people, it was clear they were all wondering one thing: how was Elon Musk going to wriggle his way out of this one? The judge's expression remained impassive, but his eyes flickered with something else, curiosity. "You think you can outsmart the system, Mr. Musk?" "Not outsmart," Musk said, his voice steady, "just make sure the system does what it's meant to do, provide fair and just outcomes. You see, this fine, it doesn't actually align with the legal guidelines set forth for cases like mine." There it was. The first hint of something unexpected. The judge shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping on the gavel, still processing Musk's words. He was no stranger to legal maneuvers or clever arguments, but Musk was playing a different game, one that many in the room hadn't anticipated. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, reporters scrambling to understand what was happening. Was this just a last-ditch effort to avoid the fine, or was Musk about to reveal something nobody had seen coming? "Explain," the judge said, his voice colder now, more challenging. Musk paused for a moment, as if considering his next words carefully. "There's an error in how the fine is structured. If we look at the data more closely, we'll see that the fines imposed are based on outdated regulations, and based on the timeline of the incident in question, they shouldn't apply to me in the first place. In fact, the fine you've suggested goes beyond what is legally permissible." The room went quiet. The judge seemed to take a moment to digest Musk's words. The media's cameras clicked faster than ever. This wasn't just a fine anymore, it was turning into a legal battle, and Musk had just opened the door for something much larger. "You are suggesting that the fine is invalid?" The judge's voice now carried an edge of skepticism. "Not invalid," Musk replied smoothly, "but miscalculated. And I believe the facts will support my position." The judge remained silent for a moment, contemplating the implications of Musk's statement. Everyone in the room was waiting for the next move. Was this a bluff? Or had Musk actually found a legal loophole that no one else had seen? Musk's eyes never left the judge. He had made his move. And now, the world was waiting to see how the court would respond. "What's your next step, Mr. Musk?" the judge asked, his tone less certain than before. "Give me a moment," Musk replied, his voice almost playful. "I think I can offer you something that'll change your mind about this whole situation." And just like that, in the span of a few sentences, the entire courtroom shifted. The people who had once expected Musk to simply fold under pressure now found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about the case. Was this really a fight that Musk could win? The real question remained, how far would Elon Musk go to turn the tables in his favor? And what was he planning next? What would you do if you were caught in a situation with no way out, yet you still had control over the outcome? The answer was about to unfold in a way no one could have predicted. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Before Elon Musk walked into that courtroom, facing a judge and the looming weight of a massive fine, he had already experienced more twists and turns in his life than most could imagine. To understand how he got here, it was essential to look back at the road he traveled, the road that shaped him into the person who could face a crisis like this with calm and determination. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, on June 28, 1971, Elon Musk's childhood was marked by curiosity, ambition, and a seemingly insatiable thirst for knowledge. His father, Errol Musk, a wealthy engineer, and his mother, May Musk, a model and dietitian, had an unconventional relationship that was complicated by distance and tension. Elon, the eldest of 3 siblings, would often retreat into the world of books and computers to escape his home life, which at times felt like a battleground. By the age of 12, Musk was already showing signs of his prodigious intellect. It was during this time that he taught himself computer programming and created a video game called Blaster, which he sold to a local magazine for $500. The experience left a mark on him. The feeling of creating something out of thin air, of designing something that had never existed before, would stay with him throughout his life. But despite his intellectual prowess, Musk's social life was a different story. He was often bullied as a child, his introverted nature making him an easy target for torment. He became the focus of relentless teasing, often being physically pushed around by other students. One such incident even left him hospitalized after a group of boys beat him up, pushing him down a flight of stairs. The physical scars would fade, but the emotional scars would linger. Musk didn't seek revenge in a typical way, he channeled his energy into his ambitions, deciding that if he could outsmart the bullies in his school, he could outsmart anyone. After finishing school in South Africa, Musk moved to Canada to attend Queen's University, a decision influenced by his desire to avoid mandatory military service in South Africa, where apartheid was still in place. At Queen's, he met the person who would later become his first wife, Justine Wilson. But more than anything, Queens was the place where Musk began to realize the potential of technology and entrepreneurship. He later transferred to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States, where he earned degrees in both economics from the Wharton School and physics from the College of Arts and Sciences. It was at the University of Pennsylvania that Musk's entrepreneurial spark really began to burn. He started a company called Zip2, a software company that helped newspapers create online city guides. Musk was only 24 at the time, and within a couple of years, Compaq acquired Zip2 for nearly $300 million. Musk's first major payday was a momentous one. He walked away with $22 million. But that was just the beginning. In 1999, Musk went on to co-found X.com, an online payment company, which would later become PayPal after a merger with Confinity. It didn't take long for PayPal to take off. The company revolutionized the way people conducted online transactions, and by 2002, eBay bought PayPal for $1.5 billion in stock. Musk's share of the deal amounted to $165 million, making him a very wealthy man by the time he was 30. Despite his newfound wealth, Musk wasn't satisfied with the status quo. His next challenge would push the boundaries of human innovation to levels no one could have imagined. His passions had always been focused on the future: space exploration, renewable energy, and electric vehicles. Musk wanted to change the world, not just profit from it. In 2002, he founded SpaceX with the goal of reducing the cost of space travel and ultimately making human life multiplanetary. Musk believed that humanity's survival depended on exploring the stars, and he was determined to be at the forefront of that revolution. SpaceX would face an uphill battle, with early failures and financial crises nearly bankrupting the company. Yet Musk's refusal to quit in the face of adversity became legendary. Meanwhile, Musk also took the reins at Tesla Motors in 2004, a year after the company was founded. Tesla's mission was to create electric vehicles that were not only environmentally friendly but also desirable, fast, and powerful. It was an uphill battle, with most people laughing off the idea that electric cars could compete with gas-powered ones. But Musk proved them wrong, pushing the company forward with innovative designs and cutting-edge technology. By 2012, Tesla unveiled the Model S, which would go on to become a game-changer for the automotive industry. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement. Musk had succeeded in proving that electric cars could be luxurious, high-performance vehicles, and Tesla was soon on the map as one of the most important automakers in the world. But even as Musk's companies soared to new heights, his personal life remained complicated. His marriage to Justine Wilson ended in 2008, and the emotional toll it took on him was evident. Musk then married actress Tallulah Riley twice, and his love life became a subject of fascination for the public. But despite the chaos in his personal life, Musk's professional life continued to thrive. He went on to create the Boring Company, a venture aimed at solving traffic congestion with an innovative system of underground tunnels. In addition, Musk's company Neuralink began working on technologies designed to merge the human brain with artificial intelligence, and he was a driving force behind SolarCity, a company focused on solar energy. Musk's journey had been anything but smooth, but each obstacle he faced only made him more determined. He had been tested time and time again, whether it was in his personal life, his businesses, or his ventures into space. Musk had faced setbacks, failures, and criticism, but through it all, his resilience had remained unwavering. His reputation for thinking big, breaking the rules, and questioning conventional wisdom became a part of his identity. And yet, despite all his successes, he had never been immune to criticism. Many saw him as a controversial figure, someone who pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable in business and in society. His bold moves and unconventional strategies had made him a target for both praise and scorn. So when Musk found himself in that courtroom, facing a massive fine that could derail years of hard work, it wasn't just another obstacle in his journey, it was yet another test of his resolve. This moment, this trial, would be a defining moment for him. It was a reminder that even someone like Musk, who had reshaped industries and revolutionized the way people thought about space and energy, still had to fight for his success. But one thing was certain, no matter how tough things got, Elon Musk would never back down. If anyone could outsmart the system, it was him. Elon Musk had always prided himself on being a problem solver. His mind operated like a machine, constantly analyzing, deconstructing, and finding new ways to approach problems that others deemed unsolvable. And yet, even for someone as sharp as Musk, the courtroom had a way of shifting the rules. What began as a simple dispute over a fine had now escalated into a high-stakes battle, one that threatened to expose more than just the legality of a monetary penalty. It threatened to shake the very foundation of Musk's empire. The judge's skeptical tone had shifted to something more cautious. Musk's assertion that the fine was miscalculated wasn't just a legal argument, it was a direct challenge to the judicial system. The room was tense, with reporters feverishly scribbling notes and the media cameras snapping every detail. Musk's legal team, who had been quietly observing, exchanged glances. They knew this was just the beginning. Mr. Musk, the judge said, his voice now betraying a hint of doubt, are you suggesting that the fine, imposed under federal guidelines, was done in error? Musk smiled, though there was no arrogance in his expression, only calm certainty. Not suggesting, Your Honor, he replied smoothly. I'm stating it. The fine exceeds the maximum limit allowed under the specific guidelines of this case. And while I respect your ruling, I believe the fine was incorrectly calculated, both in terms of severity and structure. The courtroom held its breath. What Musk was implying was bold, and it wasn't just about challenging a fine. He was questioning the very foundation of how corporate violations were assessed in the first place. Musk had always been a disruptor, but this was something even more daring. The judge's face hardened, the faintest line of irritation crossing his brow. This is highly unorthodox, Mr. Musk, the judge warned, his tone sharpened. Are you suggesting that I've made a mistake in my judgment? Musk's gaze remained unwavering. I'm not accusing anyone, Your Honor. I'm simply asking for a re-evaluation based on the evidence. Musk's legal team quickly began preparing a motion to challenge the ruling, while the prosecutor on the other side scrambled to reinforce their position. The courtroom was now a battleground, and the stakes were higher than ever. The public, who had gathered in droves, was now hooked on every word that was spoken. Musk's challenge to the fine wasn't just an appeal, it was a calculated move. He wasn't just fighting for his business's survival, he was fighting for the principle of fairness. He had the resources, the intelligence, and the will to turn the tables. But not everyone saw it that way. For many in the courtroom, this wasn't just about numbers on a page, it was about power, influence, and a man who had often played outside the conventional rules. As the debate continued, Musk's mind worked furiously behind the scenes. He wasn't merely waiting for his lawyers to navigate the legal process, he was already planning his next steps. His team was mobilizing, gathering documents, preparing arguments, and most importantly, working on building a case that would shift public perception in his favor. But Musk wasn't just focused on the fine. His legal team had uncovered something far more troubling, an insider leak, suggesting that some of the data used to assess the fine had been tampered with. This discovery had the potential to turn the entire case on its head. If the information had been manipulated, the fine could be deemed invalid altogether. The question was, how far would Musk go to expose this? Musk knew that the courtroom wasn't the only place where this fight would play out. Media outlets, tech blogs, and news channels were all waiting for the next move. Musk had a unique ability to control the narrative. He had done so with his companies, and now he would do so in the court of public opinion. As the session wrapped up, Musk's lawyer, Daniel Ross, stood up to address the court. Your Honor, he said, his voice calm and precise, we request an extension to review new evidence that has come to light regarding the calculation of this fine. The evidence suggests discrepancies that could change the outcome of this case. The judge looked skeptical, but the motion was granted. A new date was set, and the legal battle was far from over. Musk left the courtroom with his team, walking out into the blinding lights of cameras and microphones. Outside the courthouse, reporters bombarded him with questions. "Mr. Musk, do you really believe you can win this case?" one asked. Musk paused, his expression impassive. "I don't think it's about winning, I think it's about ensuring fairness. This isn't just about me, it's about holding the system accountable." But as he spoke, there was something else in his eyes, a glint that hinted at the true depths of his resolve. Musk wasn't just looking to resolve a fine. He was looking to rewrite the rules. The media frenzy continued. Musk's challenge to the fine had become a nationwide spectacle. The story had gone viral, with people discussing everything from the legitimacy of the fine to Musk's willingness to go to extraordinary lengths to protect his business interests. His name was on everyone's lips, both in admiration and in scorn. He had become a symbol of defiance, the embodiment of a man who refused to be crushed under the weight of bureaucracy. But what had started as a simple legal matter had now spiraled into something much bigger. The insider leak regarding the manipulated data was gaining traction, and soon, even government agencies were beginning to take notice. Musk's legal team had secured additional evidence that suggested something much larger was at play. There was potential corporate espionage involved, and Musk's case could now have far-reaching implications beyond just his company. Musk's next move would be crucial. The fine was still looming over him, but the real battle was no longer just about the fine itself. It was about the system that imposed it, and the truth that lay hidden beneath the surface. "Do you have any comment on the new evidence?" a reporter shouted as Musk entered his office later that evening. Musk stopped, turning to face the camera. His expression remained neutral, but his words were anything but. "We'll get to the truth," he said, his voice unwavering. "And when we do, it will change everything." The air around Elon Musk had grown thick with tension. The case was no longer just a legal dispute, it was a full-blown spectacle, drawing attention from every corner of the media, tech industries, and even political circles. What began as a simple challenge to a fine had evolved into an all-out confrontation between one of the world's most influential entrepreneurs and the very system that had once served as the foundation of his success. Behind the scenes, Musk was gathering forces. He wasn't just relying on his legal team, he was bringing in experts from all fields, tech specialists, investigative journalists, data scientists, and even insiders from his own companies. Musk knew that if he was going to win this, he needed more than just a legal argument, he needed to expose the truth in a way that couldn't be ignored. The stakes were now higher than ever before. His empire, the companies he had built from the ground up, could all come crumbling down if the system found a way to bury him under this fine. As the court date neared, Musk's preparation intensified. He wasn't sleeping much, constantly revisiting every detail of the case and the new evidence that had surfaced. The leak about the tampered data had shaken the very foundation of the prosecution's argument. If proven true, it would render the entire case invalid, and Musk knew that if he could turn the tables in his favor, the fallout would be massive. But Musk wasn't just preparing for a legal victory, he was preparing for a fight on multiple fronts. The media's scrutiny was relentless, with every development being dissected, criticized, or praised depending on the angle. Some viewed Musk as a hero, standing up against a flawed system. Others painted him as an arrogant billionaire fighting to escape accountability. The pressure was mounting, and Musk, despite his usual composure, began to feel the weight of the battle pressing down on him. The courtroom was set for another showdown, and Musk knew this was going to be different. The judge was under increasing pressure to make a decision, and with the new evidence in play, the case was beginning to take on a life of its own. Musk's legal team, led by his trusted lawyer Daniel Ross, had spent weeks meticulously reviewing the data, tracing its origins, and confirming that the calculations used to impose the fine were not just flawed, they were manipulated. The leak that had surfaced earlier was no accident. Someone was intentionally trying to undermine Musk, and it wasn't just about the fine anymore, it was about something bigger. Musk had been targeted, and now he was determined to turn the tables. The day of the hearing arrived, and the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Journalists packed the benches, cameras ready to capture every moment. Musk, dressed in his usual dark suit, walked in with the confidence of a man who had faced adversity before, and overcome it. As he entered the room, the chatter quieted. Everyone was waiting for the next move. "Your Honor," Musk's lawyer began, standing tall before the judge, "we come before you today not only to challenge the fine imposed on Mr. Musk but to bring to light a new set of circumstances that have been concealed from the public. The fine was based on data that, we believe, was intentionally tampered with." A ripple of surprise spread through the courtroom. The judge, who had been stone-faced up to this point, now raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by the boldness of the claim. Musk's team had done their homework. They presented evidence, emails, internal communications, and documents, that connected the dots between a shadowy figure inside the regulatory body and external parties who had an interest in making sure Musk was held accountable for a fine that was not only excessive but seemingly unjustified. The tampering wasn't just an error, it was part of a larger scheme to bring Musk down, to discredit him in front of the public, and to make an example of him. The prosecution, caught off guard by the presentation, scrambled to respond. They tried to deflect, dismissing the evidence as circumstantial, claiming it was too speculative to be taken seriously. But the damage had been done. The courtroom was alive with energy. The tide had turned, and everyone in the room could feel it. The judge, though still cautious, was visibly shaken. "We will take a recess to review the new evidence," he declared, his voice laced with uncertainty. "This court will reconvene in 2 hours." As the gavel came down, the room erupted in whispers. The judge's decision to take a break had sent a clear message: this was no longer a straightforward case. Musk had stirred the pot in a way that couldn't be ignored. Outside the courtroom, the media swarmed Musk, bombarding him with questions. "Do you think this is over?" one reporter asked, his camera capturing every movement. Musk didn't respond directly. Instead, he walked past the crowd, his face calm, but his mind racing. He had just fired a shot across the bow of the entire system, and now, the world was watching. As Musk retreated to his private quarters to wait for the court to reconvene, he felt the familiar pulse of adrenaline course through his veins. This was the moment where everything could change. If he could prove the data had been tampered with, it wouldn't just be about a fine, it would be about exposing corruption within the very institutions that had helped shape his rise. It would be a game changer. But Musk also knew that the path ahead wasn't guaranteed. His rivals were already sharpening their knives, waiting for any misstep to capitalize on. The media, who had once fawned over his every success, were now poised to turn on him if he faltered. And worst of all, the very people he had once trusted might have been the ones to set him up. The tension in the air was palpable, and Musk could feel the weight of it pressing on him from all sides. The time for preparation was over. Now, it was about execution. The courtroom reconvened with an air of anticipation. Everyone was on edge, waiting for the judge's next move. Musk sat at the table, his hands folded in front of him, his face a mask of composure. He knew the game was afoot. The judge took his seat, the room falling silent. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and addressed the court. "I have reviewed the evidence presented by Mr. Musk's legal team, and I must say, this is unlike any case I have encountered in my years on the bench. We will adjourn for a further investigation into the claims made today." A wave of disbelief washed over the room. An adjournment meant more time for Musk's team to dig deeper, more time for the press to amplify the story. It also meant more time for the world to witness the unraveling of a case that had once seemed so straightforward. Elon Musk wasn't just fighting for his company now, he was fighting for the truth. The 2 weeks that followed the court's decision to adjourn felt like an eternity for Elon Musk. Every day was spent in the whirlwind of constant preparation. His legal team was working around the clock, running down every lead, cross-referencing data, and trying to get to the bottom of the tampered evidence. But as the days stretched on, Musk could feel the pressure mounting, not only from the legal world but from the media, the public, and even his own employees. The conspiracy against him, once just a whisper, was now louder than ever. Rumors of corporate espionage, manipulation within the regulatory body, and dirty tactics used to undermine him were spreading like wildfire. The stakes were higher than Musk had ever imagined. His reputation, which had once been built on innovation and a near-mythical ability to challenge the status quo, was now on the line. The media, who had once lauded him as a visionary, were now turning their attention to his every move, scrutinizing every decision he made. If he faltered, they would pounce. Musk wasn't used to this level of public scrutiny. He was accustomed to being the disruptor, to challenging norms and making waves. But this was different. This wasn't about new technologies or business ventures, it was about his very character, his integrity. He had worked so hard to build the public's trust, but now, every word he spoke, every move he made was being questioned. But it wasn't just his reputation on the line anymore. The revelation of the tampered data had unearthed something far darker, a conspiracy that went deeper than Musk could have ever imagined. The leak that had initially seemed like an isolated issue was now part of a much larger web, one that involved individuals within his own circle, people he had trusted for years. Musk had never thought he would find himself in this position. Fighting not only against the system but also against those who had once been his allies. It was a gut-wrenching realization. The breakthrough came late one evening, just days before the next court session. Musk was in his office, alone, going over the evidence with his most trusted advisor, Sarah Bennett, a former cybersecurity expert who had joined his team a few years back. They had been tracking the origins of the tampered data, trying to connect the dots and figure out who was behind the leak. They had already uncovered a few key players, but one name kept resurfacing, a name Musk had hoped never to hear again, James Caldwell. Caldwell had been a senior executive at one of Musk's companies years ago, a brilliant but ambitious man who had left the company under mysterious circumstances. Musk had always thought well of him, trusting Caldwell with high-stakes projects. But now, as Sarah dug deeper, it became clear that Caldwell had a hand in manipulating the very evidence that was being used to bring Musk down. Worse still, it seemed that Caldwell was not acting alone. There were other names connected to the conspiracy, but Caldwell was the central figure. "Are you sure about this?" Musk asked, his voice shaking with disbelief. He had known Caldwell. He had trusted him. Sarah nodded grimly, her fingers tapping rapidly on her laptop's keyboard. "I'm positive. Caldwell's involvement is undeniable. He was part of a larger network of individuals who had a vested interest in seeing you fail." The room felt colder, the weight of the revelation settling over Musk like a thick fog. Caldwell had always been ambitious, but this was a betrayal on a level Musk hadn't imagined. The fact that someone within his own circle could orchestrate such a scheme, manipulating data to get him fined, was beyond comprehension. Why? Musk asked, more to himself than to Sarah. Why would he do this? Sarah didn't have an answer. She simply shook her head. The only thing that was clear was that Caldwell had been playing a long game, one that Musk had never seen coming. The emotional weight of the situation hit Musk harder than he expected. As a man who had always prided himself on being a visionary, someone who could see the bigger picture, he was now confronting a much more personal issue. The trust he had placed in people who had been part of his inner circle, was shattered. The feeling of betrayal gnawed at him, and for the first time in years, he began to question the very foundations of his empire. Was it all built on lies? He spent the next few hours alone in his office, grappling with the enormity of the situation. He couldn't shake the image of Caldwell's face, the man who had once been a trusted ally, now revealed as one of his greatest adversaries. And it wasn't just Caldwell. The network of conspirators involved in this scheme was vast, and Musk knew that taking them down wouldn't be easy. It wasn't just about the fine anymore. It was about exposing a web of corruption that ran deeper than he could have ever imagined. The weight of it all began to take its toll. Musk wasn't sure if he could continue fighting, if he had the strength to take on not just the legal system but the very people who had once stood by his side. For a moment, he felt the crushing burden of doubt. But then, something shifted. As the hours wore on, Musk found himself standing in front of the massive window of his office, looking out at the night sky. The lights of the city below twinkled, a reminder of the world that had always seemed so full of promise, so full of potential. He had faced obstacles before, seemingly insurmountable challenges, and had overcome them. Why should this be any different? Musk's gaze hardened as the realization set in: he wasn't going to let this defeat him. He wasn't going to let this betrayal, this attack on everything he had built, define his legacy. He had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let a handful of conspirators destroy everything. He turned back toward his desk, his mind already racing with the next steps. This was no longer just a legal battle. It was a fight for truth, for integrity, and for the future of everything he had worked for. "I'm not done yet," Musk said softly to himself, his voice low but filled with the weight of newfound resolve. The next day, as Musk prepared to face the courtroom again, he felt a surge of energy. The case had now become something much larger than him, something that could affect not just his businesses but the entire landscape of corporate governance. If he could expose the corruption, it would change the way the world viewed power and accountability. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about something bigger. The media frenzy was already in full swing, the public eagerly awaiting the next phase of the trial. Musk had already made up his mind. He would use this platform. Not just to fight for his own future, but to fight for the future of anyone who had ever been targeted unjustly. The final confrontation was approaching, and Musk was ready. The emotional toll had been immense, but he had found the strength to face it head-on. The day of the final hearing arrived with an electric buzz that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the courtroom. It was impossible to ignore the weight of the moment, the pressure of the truth hanging in the balance. Elon Musk had prepared for this moment for weeks, months even, but now, standing at the heart of this legal battlefield, he knew this was more than just a case. This was the battle of his career, his legacy, and, in many ways, his very identity. The media was relentless, and outside the courtroom, the press had set up camp, waiting for any shred of news to break. The stakes were high, more than just Musk's businesses, but the entire tech industry, the systems of accountability, and the very integrity of corporate governance itself were at risk. If Musk lost, it wouldn't just be a personal defeat, it would signal to the world that even the most powerful among them could be brought down by a corrupted system. Inside, the tension was palpable. Musk's legal team, led by Daniel Ross and Sarah Bennett, had prepared their final arguments. The evidence was in place, meticulously documented. Musk was no longer the man who had walked into this mess months ago, uncertain and questioning his every move. He had transformed, become a force to be reckoned with. But even with all the preparation, he knew that the battle was still far from over. His adversaries were not just the prosecution, they were the very system he had once trusted. The judge entered the courtroom, his face stern, the weight of the situation evident in his every move. He took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and looked out at the room, his gaze sharp and calculating. The moment had arrived. The final showdown was about to begin. "Mr. Ross, you may proceed," the judge said, his voice heavy with the seriousness of the occasion. Daniel Ross rose from his seat and approached the podium. His voice, confident and calm, filled the room as he began his closing statement. "Your Honor, members of the court, today we present more than just a challenge to a fine. We present the truth. The evidence we have uncovered proves that Mr. Musk was not just wronged by a system that failed him, but that there was a deliberate and coordinated effort to undermine his reputation, his business, and his very future." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. "We have presented proof of tampered data, evidence of manipulation within the regulatory body, and the involvement of individuals who sought to profit from Mr. Musk's downfall. These people, who were once part of his trusted circle, orchestrated this entire scheme to bring him to his knees. And we are not just talking about a minor error here, we are talking about intentional acts of corruption designed to destroy everything Mr. Musk has worked for." Ross's words hit hard, reverberating through the courtroom. Musk's eyes scanned the faces in the room, the judge, the jury, the prosecution. He could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The pieces were falling into place. The question we must all ask ourselves, Ross continued, is why? Why would anyone, especially those in positions of power, go to such lengths to sabotage a man who has revolutionized multiple industries? The answer is simple, because they are afraid of what he represents. They are afraid of change. They are afraid of the future. Musk's heart raced as the implications of Ross's words set in. It wasn't just about the fine. It was about a much larger fight, a battle for the future. The corrupt system, the ones who had tried to tear him down, weren't just protecting themselves, they were fighting against the very forces of innovation that Musk stood for. He was a threat, not because of the mistakes he had made, but because of what he represented. A future that wasn't bound by old rules, old structures, and old ways of doing business. Musk straightened up in his seat, his focus narrowing. He had seen this fight from every angle, corporate, legal, personal, but now it was clearer than ever. He was the last bastion of a world that had yet to fully embrace the future. The people who were trying to bring him down weren't just trying to stop him, they were trying to stop what he was building. The prosecution's response was expected. They had been on the defensive from the start, scrambling to downplay the evidence Musk's team had unearthed. But they knew this was their last chance to salvage something from the wreckage. The defense has presented a compelling narrative, the lead prosecutor began, his voice cold and clinical. But a narrative does not constitute proof. We have not seen conclusive evidence of the conspiracy that Mr. Ross claims. The data discrepancies are minor, and even if there was a mistake, it does not justify Mr. Musk's actions or his blatant disregard for the regulatory system. There is no reason to believe that the fine should not stand. The prosecutor's words were met with a murmur from the crowd. They knew it was a last-ditch effort, a desperate plea to salvage a case that had already started to unravel. Musk could see the doubt in the eyes of the prosecutor, the desperation to hold on to whatever scraps of credibility remained. Furthermore, the prosecutor continued, we must remember that Mr. Musk's wealth and influence cannot shield him from the consequences of his actions. No one is above the law. Musk sat back, his face a mask of calm, but inside, he felt a rush of determination. He wasn't above the law. But he was certainly not going to let the law be manipulated to bring him down. He would fight back, and he would expose the corruption that had tried to destroy him. The judge had heard enough. The time for arguments was over. He stood up, his gavel in hand, signaling the end of the hearing. After reviewing all of the evidence presented in this case, including the new revelations brought to light by Mr. Musk's legal team, this court will adjourn for a final review. A decision will be rendered in 2 weeks' time. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension. 2 weeks. That's all Musk had left. 2 weeks to find a way to completely break the case open and turn it in his favor. He had come so far, but the final hurdle was still ahead. And Musk knew that it wasn't just about winning anymore, it was about exposing the truth for everyone to see. As he left the courtroom, the weight of what had just transpired pressed down on him. The legal battle was far from over, but something inside Musk had shifted. He wasn't just fighting for his business or his reputation anymore. He was fighting for something bigger, something that could change the course of history. The next 2 weeks felt like a slow, torturous crawl for Elon Musk. While he had won the battle for now, the war was far from over. Every day, he fought to stay focused, surrounded by his team and the mounting pressure of the looming decision. The media storm hadn't stopped. If anything, it had only grown more intense as rumors and whispers circulated about what was happening behind closed doors. But Musk knew this was it, the final phase. The moment of truth was approaching, and it wasn't just about clearing his name. This was about exposing something far more sinister, something that could reshape the very foundations of the system that governed not only his industry but the world itself. Musk's thoughts were constantly consumed by one question: who else was involved? It was late one night when Sarah Bennett, his most trusted advisor, found it, the final piece of the puzzle. She had been going through the mountain of documents again, reviewing the tampered evidence and cross-referencing everything once more. Something had been bothering her about the timing of the data manipulations, and she had a nagging feeling that they hadn't yet uncovered the full extent of the conspiracy. That night, her suspicion led her to a series of encrypted emails that had slipped under the radar. Musk had seen those emails before, but it wasn't until now that Sarah pieced everything together. The names involved were far more high-profile than anyone had anticipated. And, most shockingly, one of those names belonged to a key player in Washington, a prominent senator known for his ties to the tech industry. "Look at this," Sarah said as she entered Musk's office, her voice tight with urgency. Musk glanced up from his work, his brow furrowed. "What is it?" Sarah handed him a printed copy of the email chain. Musk scanned the document quickly, his pulse quickening. The email was between Caldwell and the senator, discussing the necessary adjustments to Musk's regulatory filings in exchange for favorable treatment in future legislation. This is bigger than I thought," Musk muttered, staring at the words in disbelief. Caldwell had been working with the senator all along, manipulating data not just for personal gain but to influence political decisions that could affect Musk's entire industry. The conspiracy was even deeper than he had imagined. "Not just Caldwell," Sarah continued, "there's a network of powerful figures here. Big names. Tech executives, lobbyists, and now this senator. They were all involved in getting Musk fined, making sure he would be distracted, bogged down by legal battles, while they pushed forward their own agendas." Musk felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The game they were playing wasn't just about corporate espionage or dirty tricks, it was about control. The same people who had been trying to tear him down were part of a much larger scheme to reshape the tech industry to their own advantage. "This is it," Musk said, his voice more determined than ever. "We expose this. All of it." Musk and Sarah knew that they had a chance to turn the tide. The information they had uncovered was explosive, but it wasn't going to be enough to simply present it in court. This was a battle for the public's trust, and they needed to make sure the world knew what was happening behind closed doors. They called an emergency meeting with Musk's legal team, including Daniel Ross, and discussed their options. The decision was made: they would go public. The documents would be shared with the press, the names of the corrupt individuals would be revealed, and Musk would confront the conspiracy head-on. The risk was enormous. Going public meant they were no longer just fighting a legal battle, they were fighting a political one. Powerful enemies would be brought into the light, and the ramifications could be catastrophic. But Musk had no choice. This was bigger than just clearing his name, it was about exposing a system that needed to be dismantled. As the plan came together, the urgency was palpable. The world was watching, and Musk knew that every step they took had to be calculated. The press release was ready, and it was set to drop the morning before the court's final decision. The day before the final ruling, the press release was set to go live. Elon Musk stood in front of the media cameras, his demeanor calm but resolute. His legal team stood beside him, and Sarah Bennett was in the background, her eyes scanning the room, alert for any surprises. Musk took a deep breath and began to speak. "Today, I stand before you not only as the CEO of a company but as someone who believes in the power of innovation, truth, and accountability. For months, I have been fighting a battle not just for my businesses but for the integrity of the system that governs us all." He paused, making eye contact with the cameras, letting the weight of his words settle. "Over the course of this case, my legal team and I uncovered a conspiracy that goes far beyond a fine or a regulatory issue. We uncovered a network of influential figures who sought to manipulate the system, not just to harm me but to control the future of the tech industry. These individuals, including a prominent senator and a former trusted employee, were part of a scheme designed to undermine the very principles of fairness and accountability." Musk's voice grew more impassioned as he continued. "Today, I'm not just fighting for my reputation. I'm fighting for the future of innovation, for the idea that no one, no matter how powerful, should be above the law. This is not just my fight, it's a fight for anyone who has ever been targeted, silenced, or crushed by a system that was supposed to protect them. He paused again, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. And tomorrow, we will present the full evidence. The truth will be made public for all to see. As the press release went live, the world erupted. Social media exploded with reactions, and news outlets scrambled to cover the developing story. The accusations were shocking. Powerful figures, some of whom had once been untouchable, were now implicated in a massive conspiracy. The coverage was relentless. The public demanded answers. Within hours, the names of the senator and Caldwell were trending across every news platform. Musk's reputation, once on the brink of destruction, was now in a completely different light. People began to rally behind him, recognizing the scale of the injustice he had faced. But Musk knew that this was only the beginning. The real battle was just ahead. The following morning, the final ruling was handed down. The judge, visibly shaken by the new revelations, announced that the court would review the evidence and deliver a verdict after a brief recess. Musk stood tall, his resolve unwavering. The legal battle was far from over, but he knew one thing for sure: no matter what happened, the truth had been revealed. And once the truth was out, there would be no going back. The courtroom was packed to the brim. The energy in the room was electric, the tension almost tangible as the final ruling was about to be delivered. Elon Musk stood at the center, flanked by his legal team, while reporters and spectators filled the seats. The judge, a stern figure known for his meticulousness, was preparing to make a decision that would change the course of the trial, and perhaps the very structure of corporate governance. Musk, however, wasn't thinking about the press, the cameras, or even the judge. His mind was focused on one thing: the truth. It had been revealed to the world in a way that no one had expected, and now it was time to see if that truth would lead to justice. But as he looked around the courtroom, he couldn't shake the feeling that the battle for justice wasn't just about what would happen in this room, it was about how this case would ripple outward and challenge everything that had been taken for granted. The courtroom was unusually quiet as the judge entered and took his seat. His gavel rang out, signaling the beginning of what would be the final stage of this long and tumultuous journey. "Mr. Musk, I will now announce the decision of the court," the judge said, his voice echoing through the silence. The room held its breath as everyone turned their attention to him. Musk's legal team stood straight, waiting for the judgment that would determine the next phase of his future. In the gallery, journalists clutched their pens and notepads, poised to document what could be one of the most significant legal decisions in years. The court has reviewed the new evidence presented by Mr. Musk's legal team, including the damning emails and documents revealing widespread corruption within the regulatory body and the involvement of political figures, the judge began. The evidence presented is both shocking and unprecedented, and it raises questions about the integrity of the very systems meant to protect corporate governance and public trust. Musk leaned forward slightly, his heart pounding in his chest. The judge's words were exactly what he had hoped for: validation that the truth had been acknowledged. But that wasn't the end. Musk knew that words alone wouldn't be enough to make real change. It would take action. The court finds that, based on the presented evidence, the original fine imposed on Mr. Musk is null and void. Furthermore, the court will initiate a full investigation into the actions of the individuals involved in the conspiracy. This includes the prominent senator mentioned in the evidence, as well as the former employee, Mr. Caldwell. Their actions have not only tainted this case but have also undermined the very foundation of public trust. A gasp echoed through the courtroom, followed by an eruption of whispers. Musk's team exchanged triumphant glances. They had won, but the fight was far from over. The court had made it clear that this was not just a personal victory for Musk, it was a victory for the integrity of the system itself. But then the judge's voice cut through the murmur of the courtroom. "However, Mr. Musk, I must also address the actions that led to this situation in the first place," the judge said, his tone now more measured, his gaze unwavering. "While the court acknowledges the wrongdoing of others, we cannot ignore the fact that Mr. Musk himself has faced significant regulatory violations in the past. Therefore, while the fine is lifted, I am imposing a new, more stringent set of oversight measures on Mr. Musk and his companies. These measures will remain in effect for the next 5 years, and any future violations will be met with severe consequences. The courtroom fell into an awkward silence as the judge's words sunk in. Musk's legal team was quick to assess the situation. The fine was gone, but the stipulations were clear. They had won the battle, but the price was not without its cost. Musk, who had been fighting not just for his reputation but for the future of his companies, now faced the challenge of proving that he could work within the very system that had tried to break him. As the ruling sank in, the media's attention shifted rapidly from the judge's decision to the implications of that decision. Was this a true victory for Musk? Had the court's verdict exposed a systemic failure, or was it simply a momentary win that came at a greater cost? The announcement of the court's decision sparked a media frenzy. Social media exploded with reactions, some applauding the ruling as a triumph for truth, while others questioned the judge's decision to impose further regulatory measures on Musk's companies. It was clear that Musk was still under the microscope. The next few years would not be easy. But for now, Musk was relieved. The immediate threat had been neutralized. The fine was gone, and the corrupt officials were now in the spotlight. He had done what no one thought possible. He had fought back against a broken system and emerged victorious. But Musk knew that victory was never just about what happened in a courtroom, it was about what you did with that victory afterward. While the ruling had been a clear blow to the corrupt forces within the system, it didn't mean the end of Musk's battle. If anything, the stakes had only increased. Now, his companies were under greater scrutiny, and the political landscape had shifted. Some of the people who had been involved in the conspiracy were already making moves to protect their interests. Musk couldn't afford to relax, not for a second. It was during this time of reflection and recalibration that Musk received an unexpected call. It was from his former rival, Rebecca Moore, the CEO of one of the largest tech conglomerates in the country. Musk hadn't spoken to her in years, not since their last public spat over competing projects. But when he answered, there was no animosity in her voice, only urgency. "We need to talk," Rebecca said. "What you uncovered in that courtroom. It's bigger than anything you realize. I've been watching this for a while, and you've got a target on your back. If you don't want to go down in flames, we need to work together." Musk paused, surprised by the offer. Rebecca Moore was known for her cutthroat business tactics, but her words weren't just an opportunistic pitch, they were a call to action. The stakes had risen for everyone, and even the old enemies had to recognize the danger of what was happening. "I'm listening," Musk said. "I'll explain everything. But first, let's make sure we're on the same side," Rebecca replied. In the days that followed, Musk and Rebecca met in private. Over cups of coffee, they hashed out a plan, one that would allow them to pool their resources, work together, and create a powerful alliance that could take on the corrupt forces that had tried to destroy them both. The world was watching, but Musk was more determined than ever to prove that the fight for justice was only just beginning. Together, he and Rebecca had a chance to do more than just win a legal battle. They had the power to reshape the tech industry and ensure that no one could manipulate the system again. But there was no telling what price they would have to pay. Musk and Rebecca sat across from each other at a sleek, modern conference table. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional rustle of papers. Outside, the world was swirling with the aftermath of the court's ruling, but inside, they were focused on something much bigger. "We can't just let this slip away," Rebecca said, breaking the silence. Her tone was sharp, her gaze intense. She was no longer the rival CEO Musk had sparred with in the past. In this moment, she was an ally, a partner, and they both knew it. "This isn't just about you or me. It's about the future of tech, innovation, and the people who are getting crushed by the same system that tried to take you down." Musk leaned back in his chair, absorbing her words. He knew Rebecca's reputation, she was calculating, ruthless even. But he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now, his gut told him that they were on the same side. They had a shared enemy now, a corrupt, manipulative system that used power and influence to push its own agenda, regardless of the consequences. "All right, then," Musk said, his voice calm but with a steely edge. "What's the play?" Rebecca slid a file across the table, its contents clearly marked as confidential. Musk took it, flipping through the pages. The file contained detailed information on the key players behind the conspiracy, names, transactions, hidden alliances, and a roadmap of their next moves. The list of individuals involved in the plot was staggering, with some of the most powerful people in the country at the top. "This is what we're up against," Rebecca continued. "These people think they're untouchable. But we know the truth now, and we have the evidence. We just need to get it into the right hands. There's more to this than just Caldwell and that senator. This network stretches into some of the biggest tech companies, media outlets, and even parts of government. If we want to win this war, we need to expose them all." Musk nodded, his mind racing. This was bigger than he had imagined. He had been focused on clearing his name and protecting his companies, but now he saw the opportunity to do something far more significant. The corruption wasn't just about his case, it was a systemic issue that needed to be addressed. "We go public with this," Musk said. "We make sure everyone knows the full extent of what's going on. The media will cover it, the public will demand action, and these people will have nowhere to hide." Rebecca's lips curled into a tight smile. "Exactly. But we need to be careful. We can't just throw this out there without a strategy. If we do this too soon, it'll be too easy for them to discredit us, to twist the narrative. We need a plan that hits them where it hurts." For the next few days, Musk and Rebecca worked together, building a strategy to expose the conspiracy. They brought in their best advisors, financial analysts, and media experts to ensure every move was calculated and precise. The stakes were higher now, and they couldn't afford to make a mistake. It was clear that a full-on public attack wouldn't work just yet. They needed to slowly unravel the web, piece by piece, until the public saw the true scale of the corruption. They decided to target the media first, leaking key pieces of the evidence to journalists they knew they could trust. "We'll start with the smaller stories," Rebecca said. "The leaks, the insider info, the connections that haven't been exposed yet. We'll build momentum. By the time we hit the big names, it won't just be a scandal, it'll be a movement." Musk agreed, but he also knew there was more at stake than just taking down powerful figures. This was about creating a new way forward, one where transparency, fairness, and accountability became the new standards in tech and politics. It began with an anonymous tip to a well-known investigative journalist. The story was carefully constructed, containing just enough detail to pique curiosity but not enough to give away the entire game. The journalist, known for his tenacity, picked it up immediately, sensing that this could be the story of a lifetime. Within hours, the story was live, breaking, key regulatory figures under investigation for corruption in high-stakes tech dealings. The leak sent shockwaves through the media. At first, the story seemed like just another political scandal, but as more details emerged, it became clear that the connections ran deeper than anyone had imagined. The name of the senator tied to the conspiracy was now front and center, as well as Caldwell's connections to multiple high-profile tech executives. The media frenzy exploded. News outlets scrambled to cover the growing investigation. Public opinion began to shift, with more and more people calling for accountability and transparency in government and business. Musk watched from the sidelines, knowing this was just the beginning. The pieces were falling into place, but they still had a long way to go. It didn't take long for the powerful figures behind the conspiracy to respond. They weren't going to go down without a fight. As the media storm intensified, they began to push back, hard. The senator issued a statement denying any wrongdoing, accusing Musk and Rebecca of trying to destroy their reputations with baseless accusations. Caldwell, meanwhile, went into hiding, only to reappear days later with a carefully crafted interview in which he claimed that he had been misled by others in the conspiracy. The strategy was clear: discredit Musk and Rebecca before they could reveal the full scope of the corruption. But Musk wasn't deterred. He knew they had only just begun to fight. The real power of the story lay in the unsealing of the next layer of evidence: the financial ties, the backroom deals, and the corporate cover-ups that would expose the full scale of the conspiracy. Musk and Rebecca knew that they had to stay one step ahead of the opposition. They needed to act quickly but strategically, building a case that would leave no room for doubt. The next leak would be the most dangerous yet, directly implicating some of the top figures in the tech world. They also knew that they would need to take the fight to Washington. While the media frenzy was important, true change wouldn't come until the people in power were held accountable. Musk and Rebecca began to plan a trip to Capitol Hill, where they would meet with key lawmakers and push for reforms in the tech industry. They had already secured a few influential allies, but they needed more. "This is going to take everything we have," Musk said, as they mapped out their next steps. "But we're in it for the long haul. We don't stop until we've changed the system. We don't just want to win, we want to make sure this never happens again." Rebecca nodded, her expression serious. "And we'll make sure it happens. Together." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Musk's private jet soared through the skies, cutting across clouds as it made its way toward Washington, D.C. Sitting across from Rebecca, Musk stared out the window, his thoughts focused on the mission ahead. He had faced obstacles before, but this was different. This was bigger than a legal battle or a corporate power struggle. It was about reshaping the very systems that governed the world's largest industries. Rebecca was the first to break the silence. "You know this won't be easy. Washington doesn't take kindly to outsiders trying to shake up their world." Musk nodded, his fingers tapping absent-mindedly on the armrest. "I know. But if we want real change, we have to get to the heart of it. We can't just keep playing by their rules. We've already seen how deep the corruption runs. Now, we need to expose it." Rebecca studied him carefully, a knowing look in her eyes. "This isn't just about taking down the people behind the conspiracy anymore. It's about a new kind of power. We're building a new structure, a new system. One where transparency, fairness, and accountability are at the forefront." Musk's mind raced. It had been years since he'd gotten involved in political activism, but the stakes were different now. The systems he had spent his career navigating were corrupt to the core. The government, the media, even some of the world's most powerful corporations, all were complicit in the very corruption he and Rebecca were fighting to expose. They had a plan, but it was risky. If they pushed too hard, they could find themselves targeted not just by the powerful figures behind the conspiracy, but by the entire system that had been built to protect those interests. The jet landed in D.C., and Musk and Rebecca quickly made their way to a nondescript building in the heart of the city, one of the many private conference rooms where high-stakes political meetings took place. There, they were met by a small group of influential senators and representatives, all of whom had some level of stake in the tech industry. The room was heavy with anticipation. Musk, Rebecca, and their team were there to push for immediate reforms that would bring more oversight and transparency to the tech world. It was a bold move, but they had the evidence and the momentum to back it up. As they sat down, one of the senators, a veteran politician with a reputation for being tough on corporate giants, gave them a pointed look. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Musk, Ms. Moore. You're asking us to overturn decades of policy that's been favorable to big tech. You're asking us to disrupt the power structures that have been in place for years. What makes you think we're going to support this?" Musk met the senator's gaze without flinching. "Because the system is broken," he said. "And we have the proof. We've uncovered corruption at the highest levels, and we're asking you to help us expose it. This isn't about tech companies anymore, it's about doing what's right for the people." Rebecca added, "We're not just asking for reform. We're offering a new way forward. A system that values transparency and accountability, where companies like ours can innovate without fear of being dragged down by corrupt forces." The senator sat back in his chair, considering their words carefully. The tension in the room was palpable. This wasn't a simple decision, it was a choice between preserving the status quo and risking the fallout from making sweeping changes. It didn't take long for the pushback to come. As soon as news of Musk and Rebecca's meetings with lawmakers hit the press, the powerful figures they were fighting against started to mobilize. Public statements came pouring in from the very same people who had been implicated in the corruption, all denying the accusations and framing Musk's efforts as a personal vendetta against the system. A press conference was called by the senator at the center of the scandal, a man whose face had become synonymous with the corruption Musk had uncovered. He denounced the leaked evidence, calling it a coordinated attack on American values, and painted Musk as a billionaire trying to take down the government for his own gain. "The truth is," the senator said, "Mr. Musk and his associates are using baseless accusations to distract from their own legal troubles. This is an attempt to manipulate the system for their own benefit. We cannot let this kind of reckless behavior go unchecked." The media quickly picked up on the senator's words, and soon, the public debate was raging. Many people still believed in Musk's version of events, but others were swayed by the senator's impassioned defense. The line between truth and manipulation was becoming increasingly blurry. Musk knew this would be the hardest part of the battle. The truth alone wasn't enough to win the public over. He needed to control the narrative, and that meant making sure his next move was calculated and impactful. Back in Washington, the pressure was mounting. Musk and Rebecca's allies in the Senate and Congress were working behind the scenes to rally support, but they knew the fight wasn't just about legislative change, it was about winning over the public. To that end, Musk and Rebecca had a daring idea: they would use the media not just to expose the corruption, but to completely change the narrative. The plan was simple, but dangerous. They would host a live-streamed event that would reveal never-before-seen footage of the key figures involved in the conspiracy, footage that would make the corruption undeniable. This wasn't just about leaks anymore, it was about showing the world the truth in real time, before anyone had a chance to spin it in their favor. But pulling this off wouldn't be easy. They had to make sure the footage was authenticated, that the journalists involved were trustworthy, and that no one could shut them down before the truth came out. It was a high-stakes move, and Musk knew the risk involved. If it failed, it could backfire spectacularly. The day of the broadcast arrived, and the entire world seemed to be watching. The stream began, and the first images flashed across the screen, hidden camera footage of meetings between the corrupt officials and corporate executives, discussing how to manipulate legislation for their own benefit. The footage was shocking, disturbing even, and as the camera panned across the faces of the key figures, the truth was undeniable. The reactions were immediate. Social media erupted in outrage, while journalists scrambled to verify the authenticity of the footage. But it didn't matter. The damage had been done. The conspiracy had been laid bare for all to see. Musk and Rebecca watched the feed in silence, knowing that this was the moment of reckoning. They had just thrown the first punch in what was sure to be a long and difficult battle. But they also knew this. They had the truth on their side, and in a world built on information, that could be the most powerful weapon of all. As the broadcast ended and the world began to process the fallout, Musk and Rebecca exchanged a look of quiet determination. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Powerful forces would still fight back, and they would need to remain vigilant if they were to see their vision through to the end. "We've got their attention now," Musk said quietly. Rebecca nodded. "But it's just the beginning. We're going to have to keep pushing, keep exposing, until we've changed the system for good." They both knew the risks. They knew the power they were up against. But they also knew this: they weren't backing down. They were in this fight for the long haul. The aftermath of the broadcast reverberated through the corridors of power in Washington, Wall Street, and Silicon Valley. What had started as a covert investigation by Musk and Rebecca into the heart of a corrupt system had now exploded into the public consciousness. The footage they had released was undeniable, raw, and shocking. It painted the figures behind the conspiracy as nothing more than power-hungry puppeteers, manipulating laws for their own gain. But in a world where power was the greatest currency, exposing the truth wasn't enough to guarantee victory. The retaliation came swiftly. Less than 24 hours after the broadcast, Musk's phone rang. It was Rebecca. "You're not going to like this," she said, her voice clipped with tension. "What happened?" Musk asked, already knowing that trouble was on the horizon. "They're going after everything. SEC investigations, private audits, lawsuits, you name it. They're digging into Tesla's financials, SpaceX's contracts, even Boring Company's latest projects. You're under siege." Musk took a moment to process the information. The machine was now fully in motion, the system wasn't going to take this lying down. The powerful figures they had exposed were too entrenched to just walk away quietly. They had the means to strike back and destroy reputations, and they were doing it in full force. "They'll try to bankrupt us with these tactics," Musk said, his voice steely. "But we won't back down. We have to stay on the offensive. We've got them cornered, they know it." Rebecca's voice softened, but there was still an edge of urgency. "I'm already making calls to our allies in Washington. We need to consolidate support. The public is on our side for now, but if they see us falter, if they see these attacks succeeding, they'll start to question everything." Musk let out a breath, his mind racing. He had spent years building his companies, changing the world with his innovations, and now he was watching everything unravel because he had dared to challenge the establishment. But Musk wasn't a man who crumbled under pressure. If anything, it fueled him. "Do what you need to do. I'll take care of the rest." The next few days were a whirlwind of press conferences, emergency board meetings, and public relations campaigns. Every tech outlet, every financial news channel, and every major newspaper was covering the fallout from Musk and Rebecca's broadcast. Public opinion was still largely in their favor, but the more the retaliation came in, the more it threatened to shift. Legal teams were summoned to defend against the mounting lawsuits. Tesla's stock began to dip slightly as rumors of investigations spread. SpaceX's plans for a new launch were delayed after regulatory bodies suddenly began scrutinizing their permits. Even Boring Company's projects faced roadblocks as city officials, many of whom had personal connections to the figures Musk was exposing, began to pull out of agreements. The worst part was the smear campaigns. Using every channel at their disposal, the opposition began to paint Musk as a reckless businessman, someone who didn't care about the public's interest and who was willing to bring down entire industries just to serve his ego. Headlines popped up in tabloids: "Musk's war on the system, is the billionaire out of control, and tech titan or tyrant?" Musk's desperate attempts to save face. Behind closed doors, the enemies of Musk and Rebecca were coordinating. They knew they couldn't let this scandal fade. They had to stop the revolution before it gained any more traction. Rebecca was in constant contact with journalists she had long known, trying to keep the public narrative balanced. But the weight of the media machine they were up against was beginning to show. Journalists who had once supported their cause were now being persuaded to shift their focus. The narrative was slowly turning from one of accountability and justice to one of personal vendetta and corporate warfare. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and calls, Rebecca sat down with Musk in their private office. She rubbed her eyes, clearly exhausted. "We need to push back," she said, her voice raw. "The media isn't just reporting the facts anymore, they're shaping the story. If we don't take control, this entire movement could lose its momentum. And once that happens, we lose everything." Musk leaned forward, his fingers interlocked. "How do we take control?" Rebecca's gaze hardened. "We need to hit them where it hurts, directly at the people behind the smear campaigns. We have the footage, the documents, the names. Let's start naming names. We expose the people funding these media manipulations. Make the public see who's really behind the propaganda. Musk nodded. The time for subtlety was over. If they were going to win this, they would need to fight fire with fire. Musk and Rebecca called another press conference, this time armed with new evidence. They were done defending themselves. This wasn't about answering the accusations anymore. It was about flipping the narrative. They walked into the room with confidence, flanked by their legal team and a few key allies who had already publicly pledged their support. "Good evening," Musk began, standing at the podium with Rebecca at his side. "I'm sure you've all heard the recent accusations about me and my companies. Well, I'm here today to tell you that those accusations are not only baseless, they're being orchestrated by a group of people whose interests lie in keeping the truth hidden." The reporters murmured, shifting in their seats, as Musk continued. "We've been gathering evidence of a massive media manipulation campaign, one that is designed to not only tarnish my reputation but to distract the public from the real story. These individuals are using their wealth and power to suppress the truth, to keep the public from knowing what's really going on behind closed doors." He turned to the screen behind him. A series of documents appeared, showing the names of key investors in media companies, figures who had quietly funded the smear campaigns against him. Some of the names were immediately recognizable. Prominent political figures, tech moguls, and high-powered financiers. "This is just the tip of the iceberg," Musk said, his voice steady. "These are the people who are trying to control the narrative, who are trying to stop us from bringing change. And they will not stop until they've silenced us completely." The media fallout from the press conference was immediate and intense. Public opinion, once wavering, began to shift back in Musk's favor. The public was no longer just outraged by the corruption Musk had exposed, they were now furious about the way the media had been manipulated to protect the powerful. But the retaliation didn't stop there. Musk knew they would have to brace for more attacks. The people behind the smear campaigns weren't going to let him get away with exposing them so easily. They were going to fight back, and they would fight dirty. As the battle between Musk and the system escalated, Rebecca and Musk knew that the next phase of their plan would be the most dangerous yet. They had drawn blood, and now, the opposition would do everything in their power to destroy them. In the days following the explosive press conference, the stakes grew even higher. The first signs of internal strain appeared within Musk's own teams. As more attacks poured in from all directions, media smear campaigns, legal threats, and mounting opposition from political figures, loyalty was being tested. The fight for control of the narrative was reaching a boiling point. The public had begun to take sides. On one hand, Musk had inspired a movement, on the other, the system he was challenging was pushing back hard, leveraging their power to discredit him. But there was a new and unexpected threat looming. Cracks were beginning to appear within Musk's own operations. It wasn't just the media or the government officials Musk was battling. Slowly, a sense of doubt had started creeping into his companies. The more Musk fought back against the system, the more pressure his teams came under. Key players in Tesla, SpaceX, and even Boring Company were beginning to question the path they were on. One evening, Musk sat in his private office, scrolling through the latest emails from various departments. The numbers weren't good. Tesla's stock had taken a noticeable dip, and SpaceX's upcoming launch was in jeopardy. And worst of all, several senior executives had requested meetings to express concerns over the risks Musk was taking. It was late. Rebecca was the only one in the office with him. She watched as Musk's eyes narrowed while he scanned his messages. "They're scared," Rebecca said, her voice soft but firm. "It's not just the media. The board members, investors, they're starting to get nervous." "I know," Musk muttered, clenching his jaw. "I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but the way things are turning now. It's bigger than I thought." Rebecca leaned forward, concern in her eyes. "We've built something incredible, Elon. We can't let this crisis take us down. You've always known the risks, but now it's more important than ever to stand firm." If we show any sign of weakness, if we falter even a little, they'll tear us apart. Musk let out a long breath. The question isn't whether I stand firm. It's whether my team will. The next morning, Musk made the decision to meet with his top leadership, both to address the growing tensions and to solidify his position. The meeting was tense. Around the conference table sat key players from Tesla, SpaceX, and Boring Company. As Musk entered, there was an uneasy silence. He could feel the pressure in the room. Musk stood at the head of the table, taking a long look at the faces around him. We're at a crossroads. I know you're all under immense pressure. This fight isn't just about keeping our companies afloat. It's about something bigger, changing the world. We've always known the risks of challenging the status quo. But I'm asking each of you now, are we in this together, or do we cut our losses? One of the senior executives from Tesla, a pragmatic man named Richard, cleared his throat. Elon, what you're doing is admirable, but the reality is this: your actions are putting the future of the company at risk. We're being attacked from all sides. The stock is falling. Legal battles are growing. And these aren't just attacks on you, they're attacks on everything we've built. Musk's gaze was steady. I understand your concerns, Richard. But if we give up now, if we let them break us, everything we've worked for will be for nothing. Our mission has always been to disrupt and challenge the world's biggest problems. We can't stop now just because it's hard. That's not why we started this. Another executive, Sarah, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. But how much longer can we keep going like this? Every day, it feels like we're fighting a losing battle. The public's starting to turn, and soon, it won't just be the media we're up against, it'll be our own people. Musk's eyes flashed with determination. I don't plan on losing. But we need to take a hard turn. This can't be a defensive game anymore. We need to go on the offensive. Rebecca, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Elon's right. We can't keep reacting. We need to expose the full scope of the corruption, take it to a level where they can't ignore us. We have the evidence. And we have the public's attention. Now it's time to strike harder, faster, and smarter. Musk nodded at Rebecca's words, then turned to his team. What I propose is this: we need to bring this fight directly to the people who are pulling the strings, the media moguls, the corrupt politicians, and the hidden players who think they can control the narrative. We've been playing defense, but now it's time to go on offense. We're going to make it impossible for them to silence us. There was a long silence in the room as Musk's words hung in the air. I'm not asking you to go along with this lightly, Musk continued. But I need to know, are you all with me? The room was silent for a moment longer, then Sarah spoke. I'm with you. Let's take the fight to them. One by one, the others nodded. It wasn't a unanimous decision, some of them still had their doubts, but they knew that the path Musk had laid out was the only way forward if they were going to save everything they had built. The decision was made. Musk, Rebecca, and their allies went into overdrive. Behind the scenes, they mobilized their media teams to launch a series of new initiatives to control the narrative. They would take the fight directly to the media moguls, launching a campaign that would not only expose corruption but demand accountability at the highest levels. Musk's next move was a televised address to the nation. It was bold, risky, and exactly the kind of high-stakes maneuver Musk was known for. His speech was a direct challenge to the system that had been attacking him and his companies, calling out the individuals behind the scenes who were using their power to protect their own interests. The truth has been hidden for too long, Musk said, his voice calm but firm as he stared directly into the camera. For years, we've been told what to believe, who to trust, and how to think. But today, we're taking back control. The corrupt figures in power who have been pulling the strings behind the scenes will no longer dictate the future of this country, and they will no longer control the fate of innovation. We will fight for a future where transparency, accountability, and fairness reign. And we will not stop until the truth comes out. His words were like a call to arms. The media went wild, and public opinion started to shift again. This time, Musk wasn't just the underdog, he was a symbol of defiance. But the retaliation, as Musk knew, was far from over. The war had only just begun. In the midst of this new media blitz, Musk received an unexpected blow, a betrayal from within his own inner circle. One of his trusted allies, someone who had been instrumental in their strategy up until now, leaked confidential plans to the opposition. Musk's media campaign had been compromised. The very blueprint for the offensive that was supposed to expose the media moguls and political figures behind the conspiracy had found its way into their hands. The betrayal cut deep, and Musk knew they were now in more danger than ever. The days following the betrayal were a blur of frantic meetings, scrambling legal teams, and an atmosphere of quiet tension that had settled over Musk's companies. The plans that had been set into motion were now compromised, and the fragile trust that had bound Musk's inner circle together was beginning to crumble. Rebecca was the first to reach Musk after the leak was discovered. She found him in his private office, staring at a monitor displaying emails and messages that painted a bleak picture. The leak was worse than they had feared. It wasn't just a small breach of confidential information, it was a full-scale betrayal. The entire media strategy, the names of the individuals they were targeting, and even the timing of their next big push had been handed over to the opposition. "Musk, we have a problem," Rebecca said, walking into the room and closing the door behind her. The exhaustion in her voice was palpable. Musk didn't turn from the screen. He already knew. "I know," he muttered. "Someone from the inside sold us out." Rebecca stepped forward, a mixture of disbelief and anger in her eyes. "I can't believe this. Someone we trusted. We've been compromised." Musk turned to face her, his expression hardening. "I knew this was a possibility. But I didn't think it would happen this soon." For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was as if the weight of the betrayal hung heavily in the air, suffocating them. The very foundation of their plan was now shaking, and the stakes were higher than ever. If they didn't act quickly, the enemy could twist the narrative completely. "You think it's someone from the executive team?" Rebecca asked, trying to hold it together, her mind already racing to figure out how to counter this new threat. "I don't know," Musk replied, his voice low. "But I'm going to find out. And when I do, there will be no mercy." The first step was to identify who had betrayed them. Musk knew that trust within his organization had always been delicate. As much as they had fought together for a common cause, there were always those who could be swayed, those who might choose self-preservation over loyalty when the pressure became too great. Rebecca and Musk worked in tandem to launch an internal investigation. They reviewed security footage, cross-referenced emails, and conducted discreet interviews with key staff members. The process was exhaustive, but time was running out. Every minute they spent tracking the leak was a minute the enemy could use to build their counterattack. It wasn't long before a name surfaced. The leaker was Sarah, one of Musk's senior executives from Tesla, who had previously expressed doubts about the mission and the toll it was taking on the company. Musk had always trusted her judgment, but it was clear now that her internal struggle had led her to make a dangerous decision. Rebecca was the one who confronted Sarah. The meeting took place in one of the smaller conference rooms, far from the watchful eyes of others. Sarah sat across from Rebecca, her hands folded in front of her, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. But Rebecca could see the guilt in her eyes. "Why, Sarah?" Rebecca asked, her voice cold. "We trusted you. You were part of the plan. Why betray us?" Sarah's shoulders slumped. "You don't understand, Rebecca. This whole thing, it's bigger than you think. I didn't want to, but the pressure was too much. They came to me with an offer I couldn't refuse." "Who came to you?" Rebecca pressed, her voice firm. Sarah hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I didn't have a choice. They threatened me, my family. They made it clear that if I didn't help, they'd destroy everything I've built. You have to understand, I thought they could be reasoned with, but they weren't. They're ruthless. Rebecca clenched her fists, her anger bubbling up. So you sold us out for your own safety? After everything we've done for you, you chose to betray us? I didn't want this, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. But I didn't see any other way. I'm sorry. Musk was livid when he found out. The betrayal cut deeper than he could have imagined. Sarah had been with them for years, and now, not only had she betrayed his trust, but she had handed over the very information that could destroy everything they had fought for. Rebecca stood by Musk's side as he processed the gravity of the situation. They knew that removing Sarah from the equation was necessary, but it wasn't just about punishing her, it was about protecting what remained of their fragile position. We have to make an example of her, Musk said, his voice steely. She has to know that there are consequences. And we need to show the rest of the team that there is no room for betrayal. Rebecca nodded, but the decision weighed heavily on her too. I'll handle it. She'll be removed from the team, but we need to do it carefully. We don't want to escalate this too far. The news of Sarah's betrayal spread quickly through the ranks. The aftermath was immediate. Musk's leadership was now questioned by many of his closest allies. People started wondering, if Sarah could betray Musk, could others do the same? Would there be more leaks? And worse, would they lose the public's trust? The internal strife was palpable. Key executives began to distance themselves, unsure of where their loyalties should lie. Even Musk's closest allies were starting to feel the pressure. In the coming days, a tense silence hung over the company. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust, it was a crack in the foundation of everything Musk and Rebecca had worked so hard to build. Their enemies had struck with precision, and it seemed they had succeeded in causing a divide. Meanwhile, the media was having a field day with the scandal. The leak was presented as a sign of Musk's crumbling empire. The headlines screamed, "Billionaire's inner circle turns on him," and "Musk's empire, betrayed from within." The media, once sympathetic to Musk's fight against the corrupt system, now had new ammunition to paint him as unstable and out of control. Public opinion, which had been slowly swinging in Musk's favor, now began to shift. The public's fascination with the underdog billionaire was replaced with a more cynical view. Some began to question whether Musk could truly be trusted. The stakes had grown higher, and now Musk was no longer just fighting external enemies, he was fighting to maintain control within his own ranks. Rebecca, ever the pragmatist, took the lead in addressing the public. She appeared on multiple media outlets, walking a tightrope between defending Musk and acknowledging the challenges they were facing internally. "We're not perfect," she said in one interview. "We made mistakes. We trusted someone who didn't have our best interests at heart. But what we're fighting for hasn't changed. The fight for truth, for transparency, for a better world, it's still the most important thing. We won't be deterred." As Musk and Rebecca worked to rebuild their strategy, they realized that this was a critical turning point. The betrayal had tested their resolve, but it had also clarified something important: they couldn't afford to show weakness anymore. The system they were up against wasn't going to stop. But neither could they. Musk was no stranger to adversity. He had been knocked down before and had always found a way to rise again. This betrayal, though painful, had only strengthened his determination. The fight for truth was far from over. "We'll come out of this stronger," Musk said to Rebecca one evening as they sat in his office, looking over the damage the betrayal had caused. "The system might have won this round, but it's not over. We've only just begun." The dust was still settling from the betrayal when Musk and Rebecca realized something crucial: they couldn't afford to keep fighting this battle alone. The cracks that had formed within their ranks were significant, but they weren't insurmountable. If they wanted to regain control, they needed to rebuild. It wasn't just about public perception, it was about re-establishing trust within the team and aligning their efforts against an increasingly dangerous enemy. Rebecca was the first to bring up the idea of seeking new allies. "We're running out of time," she said as she paced the room, her mind working through the possibilities. We've got the media against us, we've got corporate sharks circling, and we can't keep going like this. If we're going to get through this, we need outside support. Someone with power who believes in what we're doing. Musk nodded thoughtfully. The idea made sense. But who could they trust at this stage? After all, the world they were fighting was populated by people who had made their fortunes by controlling the narrative and suppressing those who threatened their hold on power. I've been thinking the same thing, Musk replied. We need someone with influence, someone who can back us up in ways we can't do alone. But we need to be careful. Anyone we bring in now could either make or break us. They both sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their predicament hanging over them. Then Rebecca's eyes lit up. I know someone, she said, her voice laced with a hint of excitement. A journalist. Someone with deep connections in both the media and politics. She's been a critic of the establishment for years, but she's always kept a low profile. If we bring her in, she can expose the truth in ways we can't. Musk raised an eyebrow. You've got someone in mind? Rebecca nodded. Her name's Emily Davenport. She's been a thorn in the side of corporate giants for years. She's got a reputation for uncovering the darkest secrets of the powerful. If anyone can help us shift the narrative, it's her. The decision was made quickly. Within hours, Rebecca had arranged a private meeting with Emily Davenport. They chose a quiet, inconspicuous location, a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, far from prying eyes. Musk, who had never been particularly trusting of journalists, was wary, but Rebecca's recommendation carried weight. When Emily walked in, she exuded an air of quiet confidence. She was dressed simply, with an intensity in her eyes that made it clear she was no ordinary reporter. Emily had a sharp wit and a knack for reading people, and Musk could already tell that she wasn't someone who would easily be swayed by charm or money. Mr. Musk, Emily greeted him with a nod. I've been following your story closely. It's a fascinating one, to say the least. Musk extended his hand, his demeanor cautious but respectful. It's a pleasure, Emily. We've been through some interesting times lately. Emily took a seat and got straight to the point. I've heard rumors that you've been fighting back against a system that's tried to tear you down. And I've seen the public's shifting perception of you. What's your play, Elon? Musk didn't waste time. He knew that Emily wasn't here to sugarcoat anything, she was here to get answers, and if they were going to convince her to help, they needed to be honest. The system's rigged. It's been rigged for years. And the people pulling the strings are doing everything they can to stop us from changing it. But we're not backing down. We've exposed part of the corruption, but it's just the beginning. What I need from you is more than just media coverage. I need you to help us expose the full scope of the conspiracy, the people who have been manipulating the public for years. Emily leaned forward, intrigued. You want me to go after the powerful, the ones in control of the narrative? I've been doing that for years, but this is different. This isn't just another corporate scandal. You're up against an entire system. Musk nodded. Exactly. And that's why I need someone like you. Someone who isn't afraid to speak the truth, no matter the cost. There was a long pause as Emily considered his words. Then she spoke. I'm in, she said, her tone steady. But I need to make one thing clear, this isn't a battle we can win overnight. The people you're up against are more powerful than you think. They'll fight back harder than you can imagine. Musk looked her in the eye. We've been fighting back for years. We're ready for whatever comes next. With Emily now on their side, Musk and Rebecca wasted no time in retooling their strategy. Emily's first piece was a scathing exposé on the media moguls and the political figures who had conspired to undermine Musk's efforts. She used her investigative skills to uncover the hidden networks of influence and corruption that had been running behind the scenes, pulling strings and shaping public perception. The piece hit the public like a bombshell. The media that had once painted Musk as a danger to society now had to contend with the truth of what had been happening behind the curtain. Emily's detailed reporting exposed the systemic corruption in ways that Musk's legal team could not. It was a game changer. The public reaction was immediate and polarized. Some saw it as a long overdue reckoning, while others were outraged by the level of manipulation and deceit. Musk's supporters rallied around him once more, while his detractors were left scrambling to find new ways to attack him. The impact of Emily's piece was undeniable. Within days, the narrative around Musk shifted again. He wasn't just a billionaire battling against the system, he was now the face of a larger fight against corruption and manipulation on a global scale. But with success came new threats. The powers that be weren't going to sit idly by while Musk and his team exposed their secrets. Behind the scenes, the opposition began to mobilize, pulling every string they had to discredit Emily's article and undermine Musk's position. A new wave of attacks came swiftly: legal challenges, public smear campaigns, and even attempts to sabotage Musk's companies. It became clear that they were not just dealing with corporate interests anymore. They were fighting a war with powerful forces who would stop at nothing to protect their influence. But Musk, fueled by Emily's support and a reinvigorated sense of purpose, wasn't backing down. "We've faced worse before," he said to Rebecca one night, as they reviewed their next move. "This is just another round in the fight. And I'm not going to let them win." Rebecca smiled grimly. "We're in this together. We'll keep pushing forward, no matter what." The momentum had shifted in their favor, but it was clear to Musk, Rebecca, and Emily that their enemies weren't about to let them win without a fight. The corporate giants, the political players, and the media moguls who had orchestrated Musk's downfall were regrouping, preparing for a final strike. This was no longer just a game of chess, it was a full-scale battle, and everything Musk had built was at risk. Rebecca was the first to spot the escalation. "We're not just dealing with media attacks anymore," she said, her voice low but urgent. "They're trying to hurt us in every way possible. Legal teams are digging into our finances, our product lines, everything. It's a full-blown attempt to destroy us from the inside out." Musk leaned back in his chair, staring out of the window of his private office, his mind working at full speed. "They know we're on to them. They won't stop until they've neutralized us completely. But we can't back down now. We've exposed their game, and they know it." Emily, who had been working tirelessly on the latest exposé, entered the room with a determined look on her face. "I've just uncovered something new," she said, her tone as serious as ever. "It's not just media smear campaigns. They've been using their connections to manipulate stock prices, sabotage our investors, and even plant false rumors about our products." Musk stood up, his eyes narrowing. "How deep does this go?" Emily shook her head, frustration evident. "Deeper than we thought. There's a network of insiders, connected to key financial institutions, media conglomerates, and even some government officials. They're pulling the strings, keeping the truth buried while profiting off the lies." Rebecca crossed her arms, her mind racing through the implications. "This is bigger than we imagined. If they control the media, the markets, and even the narrative in Washington, it's going to be harder to fight back. We need to counterattack, and we need to do it now." Musk knew that the time for passive defense was over. It was time to go on the offensive. He called a meeting with his top executives and legal team, including Rebecca and Emily. The strategy was clear: they needed to expose the full extent of the conspiracy and use the public's newfound awareness to push back harder than ever. "Here's the plan," Musk began, addressing the group. "We take everything Emily's uncovered and bring it to the people. But we don't stop there. We hit back with everything we've got: court battles, public speeches, and a social media campaign that exposes their lies and manipulations. We're not just fighting for our businesses anymore. We're fighting for the future." Emily, who had already started compiling her findings into a bombshell piece, nodded in agreement. "I'm ready to release everything I've uncovered. The public deserves to know the truth." Rebecca raised a hand, a concerned look on her face. But we can't just release the information and expect people to believe us. We need undeniable proof, something so solid that they can't dismiss it as another conspiracy theory. Musk smiled grimly. That's where we go a step further. We bring in our allies. I've got a few connections, people in high places, who can back up what Emily's found. They'll make sure the truth comes out. The plan was set in motion. Musk's team worked tirelessly to coordinate a media blitz that would release Emily's exposé alongside hard evidence, interviews with whistleblowers, and public testimony. They would flood every available channel with the truth, using the internet, social media, and press conferences to make sure that the world knew exactly who was behind the manipulation. The response from their enemies was immediate. They weren't going to let Musk and his team dismantle their empire without a fight. The legal teams went on the offensive, filing lawsuits, attempting to freeze assets, and even launching defamation campaigns against Musk and his inner circle. But Musk wasn't backing down. He and Rebecca spent sleepless nights strategizing, crafting counterarguments, and preparing for the onslaught. The truth was on their side, and they were ready to fight for it. When the exposé finally dropped, it hit with the force of a tidal wave. Emily's investigative work had uncovered everything: the hidden networks, the corrupt financial dealings, and the coordinated campaign to destroy Musk's reputation. The evidence was damning, and the public response was immediate. News outlets across the world scrambled to cover the story, but it was clear that the tide had turned. Musk was no longer the villain, he was the underdog hero, fighting against a system that had been rigged from the start. The exposé revealed the depth of corruption within the corporate world, exposing the very institutions that had once controlled the media narrative. The public reaction was divided, but the outpouring of support for Musk was undeniable. People who had once dismissed him as just another billionaire were now rallying behind him, demanding accountability for those who had sought to silence him. #JusticeForElon began trending on social media, and protests erupted in major cities across the globe, demanding transparency and fairness in the system. But as public opinion swayed in Musk's favor, the opposition grew desperate. They didn't want the truth to come out, and they were willing to do anything to stop it. The attacks came from all directions: cyber attacks, smear campaigns, even attempts to sabotage Musk's companies through coordinated strikes. Musk knew that they were in the fight of their lives. But he also knew one thing for certain: they couldn't afford to lose now. With the public on their side and the enemy on the defensive, the stage was set for the final showdown. Musk, Rebecca, and Emily prepared for the ultimate confrontation, knowing that this would be the moment that defined everything. They had exposed the corruption, but now they needed to finish what they had started. Musk called for one last meeting with his top allies. "This is it. We've got them on the ropes, but they'll come at us harder than ever. We need to be ready." Rebecca nodded, her resolve unshaken. "We've come this far. We're not backing down now." Emily, who had become a crucial part of the team, added, "I've got one last bombshell to drop. Something that'll make it impossible for them to deny everything we've exposed." Musk smiled. "Let's do it." In the final, decisive move, Emily uncovered the last piece of the puzzle: a direct link between the media moguls, the politicians, and the shadowy figures behind the corporate empire that had been working to destroy Musk. This wasn't just about a few bad actors, it was a global conspiracy, one that reached into the highest echelons of power. The release of this final piece of evidence sent shockwaves through the world. The truth could no longer be ignored. The puppet masters who had been manipulating the media, the markets, and the public for years were now exposed for all to see. In the aftermath, the corporate giants who had once worked in the shadows began to unravel. Investors pulled out, politicians distanced themselves, and media outlets scrambled to cover their tracks. Musk's empire wasn't just intact, it was stronger than ever. After the final exposure of the global conspiracy, the dust was still settling. Musk, Rebecca, and Emily had come through the battle victorious, but the fight for the future was just beginning. Their enemies had been exposed, but the damage they had done to the system was far from over. The world had witnessed a shocking unraveling of corporate and political corruption, and now it was time to pick up the pieces and rebuild. For Musk, the feeling of relief was fleeting. He had accomplished something monumental, but it was clear that the battle for a fair system, one that would allow innovation to thrive, was only just beginning. The first step in rebuilding was gaining back the trust of the public, investors, and the very companies that had once been loyal to Musk. His empire was scarred, but the damage was not irreparable. He and Rebecca knew that the world had seen the truth, but it was still going to take work to restore the faith that had been lost. "We have a long road ahead of us," Rebecca said as they sat together in Musk's office, reviewing the strategy for the coming months. "The public is still divided. We have to show them we're not just fighting for ourselves, but for the future." Musk nodded. "We've exposed the rot at the core of the system, but now we have to prove that we can build something better. We've got the truth on our side, but that won't be enough. We need to be more than just a symbol of resistance. We need to show the world how we can change things for the better." Emily, who had become a vital ally, sat across from them, her face reflecting both determination and concern. "I agree. We've got momentum now, but we have to use it wisely. We need to show that we can not only survive the chaos, but we can thrive in it. The public's perception of you has shifted, but it's still fragile." Musk leaned forward, his mind already working on the next steps. "Let's start by focusing on the projects that matter. We'll push forward with new technological advancements, things that will have a direct and positive impact on people's lives. Innovation is our strongest weapon, and we're going to show the world just what we're capable of." Musk's team began a relentless media campaign, one that went beyond simply defending against the lies of the past. They crafted a message of hope, innovation, and change. Musk himself took to social media, engaging directly with the public, answering questions, and addressing concerns. Rebecca and Emily worked tirelessly on the media strategy, ensuring that every public appearance, every statement, and every interview showcased Musk as the visionary leader he was. The narrative was carefully constructed, positioning him as someone who had fought against an unjust system and had come out on top, ready to lead the world into a new era. The media landscape had shifted dramatically. Once controlled by the very people who sought to bring Musk down, the media now had to contend with the truth. The coverage was mixed, some outlets still clung to the old narrative, while others began to embrace Musk's vision. The tide was slowly but surely turning in his favor. But it wasn't just about media coverage. It was about creating tangible, visible progress that could not be ignored. Musk's first big move post-exposure was the launch of a new initiative that would change the way people viewed his companies. He called it the Future Project, a series of groundbreaking technologies and solutions designed to solve some of the world's most pressing problems. It was a bold move, one that would showcase Musk's true vision for the future, not just his ambitions as a businessman. The initiative focused on three key areas: renewable energy, space exploration, and AI-driven healthcare solutions. Musk believed that these fields had the power to change the world, but only if they were developed in a transparent and responsible way. With the public's attention fixed on him, he knew that now was the time to prove that his focus was on the greater good. Rebecca and Emily helped craft the messaging for the Future Project, ensuring that it was not just about Musk's success but about the collective success of humanity. They wanted to make it clear that Musk's triumph was not a victory for the elite, but for the everyday person, someone who had fought against the system and come out with a vision of a better tomorrow. The first announcement was a new partnership with global leaders in sustainable energy. The goal: to create a worldwide network of clean energy solutions, making renewable energy accessible to even the most remote corners of the planet. The second announcement was focused on the next phase of SpaceX's Mars mission, which Musk had always believed would be humanity's next giant leap. Finally, the third project was the launch of a new AI-driven healthcare platform, designed to revolutionize how the world approached medical treatment. These announcements sent shockwaves through the world. The public, who had once been skeptical, now began to see Musk in a new light. His efforts were not just about making money or proving a point, they were about changing the world for the better. But as Musk's influence grew, so did the opposition. The enemies who had once been lurking in the shadows were now more desperate than ever. They saw Musk's rise as a threat not only to their personal fortunes but to the very system they had built. If Musk succeeded in rebuilding, the old guard would lose their power, and they weren't about to let that happen. Musk had been prepared for the corporate attacks, but there was one threat he hadn't anticipated, a betrayal from within his own ranks. One of his most trusted advisors, a man he had personally mentored and brought into the fold, turned against him. This advisor, John Pierce, had been with Musk since the early days of his ventures. He had helped shape the strategy for SpaceX and Tesla and had been instrumental in navigating the corporate world. Musk had trusted him implicitly, but Pierce had secretly been working with the opposition, feeding them information about Musk's plans and even attempting to sabotage his projects from the inside. The betrayal hit Musk hard. Pierce had been more than just an advisor, he had been a friend. But in the ruthless world they were now navigating, there was no room for weakness. Musk couldn't afford to let this betrayal slide, it was a turning point that would require immediate action. Musk, Rebecca, and Emily quickly put a plan into motion to contain the damage. They had been fighting an external enemy for so long that they hadn't considered an internal threat. Pierce's treachery had put them in a precarious position, but Musk wasn't about to let it derail everything they had worked for. They took swift and decisive action. First, they confronted Pierce, gathering all the evidence they needed to expose his involvement with the opposition. The betrayal was brought to light in a public statement, and Musk made it clear that no one, not even those closest to him, could be trusted if they weren't working toward a better future for everyone. With Pierce removed from the equation, Musk and his team doubled down on their efforts. The betrayals of the past only strengthened their resolve to succeed. They knew they were on the right side of history, and they were prepared to see this through to the end. With Pierce's betrayal exposed, Musk, Rebecca, and Emily knew the stakes had never been higher. The forces that had been orchestrating his downfall were still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Musk had faced down challenges before, but this time, he was up against more than just a corporate conspiracy. He was up against an entrenched system that had operated unchecked for decades. The truth had come out, but the real work was only just beginning. Musk's enemies were desperate, and now, they would stop at nothing to keep him from winning. This was no longer just a battle for corporate power, it was a fight for the future itself. Musk had always been a man who thrived under pressure, but the betrayal of someone he had trusted deeply shook him to his core. Pierce's actions had almost derailed everything, but in typical Musk fashion, he quickly regrouped and turned the setback into an opportunity. He understood the gravity of the situation. This was the final battle. "I'm not going to let them destroy everything we've worked for," Musk said, his voice firm as he sat with Rebecca and Emily in their war room. The room, once a space filled with plans for innovation, now had a much darker undertone, a strategy meeting for survival. "We need to hit them where it hurts." Rebecca was already on it. "We've still got loyal supporters, both in the public and in key industries. They want change as much as we do. But we need to expose the full extent of the corruption. We need to show the world that the old guard won't stop until they've crushed anyone who challenges their control." Emily, ever the strategist, nodded. "I've been gathering intel on our remaining enemies, those who were pulling Pierce's strings. It's time to connect the dots. We have to take their network down, piece by piece." Musk looked at the two of them with determination. "Then let's make sure they can't hide anymore. We take the fight to them, hard and fast." The team knew that their enemies would not be passive, they were cornered, and desperate adversaries were always the most dangerous. Musk had no illusions that this would be an easy victory. He prepared for the worst, but he would not go down without giving it everything he had. The plan was set in motion. They would use everything at their disposal to dismantle the remaining power structures, the corrupt media companies, the politicians who had been in their pocket, and the corporations that had played along with their schemes. Musk and his team would take the fight directly to the heart of the system that had tried to crush them. As the plan evolved, Musk realized that they weren't just up against powerful corporations and political elites, they were up against a media narrative that had painted him as the villain. To succeed, they needed to control the narrative, not just to fight back, but to reshape public perception. It was time for Musk to take the fight directly to the people. His team rolled out a new media campaign, one that would focus on unity, transparency, and the importance of breaking free from a corrupt system. Musk was ready to tell his story, his real story, without filters, without corporate spin, and without the media's distortions. But this time, the story wasn't about his rise to wealth or power, it was about his vision for the future. His new initiative, A Future Built by Us, was about empowering individuals and communities to take control of their futures. From renewable energy projects to space exploration, to revolutionizing healthcare through AI, Musk's message was clear: the system didn't have to be broken, it could be remade, rebuilt from the ground up. People don't just need to hear what we're doing, Musk said during an early press conference. They need to see it. We can't just talk about changing the world, we have to show them that it's possible, that it's happening. This isn't about saving ourselves, it's about giving the power back to the people. And we're doing it, step by step. The new campaign resonated with people. Musk was no longer just a billionaire entrepreneur, he was a symbol of defiance against a corrupt system. It was a powerful message, one that tapped into the widespread dissatisfaction with the current state of the world. The more Musk spoke, the more he became not just a figurehead of a movement, but its leader. As Musk's popularity soared, the opposition grew more desperate. They knew that if Musk's message gained enough traction, they would lose their grip on the world they had so carefully constructed. The media smears became more vicious, the legal challenges more extreme. The opposition wasn't just fighting to maintain control, they were fighting for survival. Musk's enemies were hitting him where it hurt. They launched a series of attacks on his companies, questioning the safety of SpaceX's missions, Tesla's technology, and even the integrity of his new healthcare initiative. The goal was simple: discredit him, sow doubt, and rally the public against him. It was a coordinated assault meant to drag him down once again. But Musk was ready for this. "We've been here before," he said, addressing his team. "They're going to try to tear us down with everything they've got. They've already done it once, and they failed. Now, they'll do whatever they can to make sure we never get back up." Rebecca and Emily stood by his side, each one firm in their resolve. "We're not backing down," Emily said. "We've got the truth on our side, and the people know it." Musk smiled grimly. "Exactly. The truth always wins in the end. We just have to make sure they know that." The climax of the battle came when Musk and his team uncovered a final piece of evidence, a deep connection between the last remnants of the opposition and international banking institutions. This wasn't just about corporate corruption, it was about control over the world's financial system. The stakes had become even higher. This was the final act, the tipping point. Musk prepared to release the damning evidence, knowing that this would be the moment that would change everything. It was time to make his move. They had everything they needed to completely dismantle the remaining power structures, to expose how deep the rot had gone. But this time, they wouldn't just expose it, they would cut the head off the snake. With the evidence in hand, Musk and his team launched a massive media offensive. The story spread like wildfire. Every major outlet was forced to cover the explosive revelations. Governments around the world had no choice but to take notice. The financial institutions that had been pulling the strings were now exposed for their role in trying to destabilize the world order. As the dust settled, it became clear that the world was irrevocably changed. Musk had succeeded, not only in defending his companies, but in bringing down a system of corruption that had long stood unchallenged. The exposure of the international financial conspiracy rocked the world to its core. Governments were forced to investigate the institutions that had been colluding to manipulate markets and control political agendas. The people were no longer passive consumers of the media, they were active participants in the fight for a better future. The truth had set the stage for an era of transparency and reform. Musk, now celebrated not only for his technological achievements but for his role in exposing global corruption, stood at the forefront of a new movement. The road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but Musk had already proven that even the most powerful forces in the world could be defeated if enough people dared to fight. With the battle for the world's future finally in the rearview mirror, Elon Musk stood at the precipice of something even greater, a new era of innovation, unity, and change. The corrupt system that had tried to hold him back was now in ruins. The truth had triumphed, but what would he do with this newfound freedom? What path would he take in a world that had been forever altered by his actions? The world was watching, and they were waiting for Musk's next move. His victory was more than just a personal triumph, it was a signal to humanity that they could overcome even the most entrenched forces of corruption. But now, the real work began, the rebuilding, the reimagining, the creation of a world that was no longer shackled by old powers. Musk's first order of business was to continue the work that had made him famous in the first place, technological innovation. But this time, he wasn't just looking to build another profitable company, he wanted to create a legacy. The Future Project was no longer just an initiative, it was the centerpiece of Musk's new vision for the world. It was a movement that would redefine humanity's relationship with technology, space, and sustainability. We've exposed the rot, and now we're going to build something that will truly serve humanity, Musk said in a press conference shortly after the collapse of the corrupt powers. This is about the future of our planet, of our species, and how we choose to live in it. The stakes are too high for us to sit idly by. His focus was clear: sustainability, humanity's exploration of the stars, and a new way of living powered by technology that would be available to all. His commitment to these values remained unwavering, but this time, the narrative was different. Musk's movement was no longer a lone wolf pushing against the system, it was a collective force that had rallied around the truth. While Musk had been busy dismantling the old system, he had also been quietly working on something bigger, a global cooperation initiative. The goal was simple but profound: global collaboration for the benefit of all, with a focus on uniting countries, corporations, and people in solving the world's most pressing problems. Musk began reaching out to leaders across the world, including heads of state, environmental organizations, and scientists. His message was clear: if humanity was going to survive and thrive, it needed to stop fighting among itself. It needed to come together. It's time to think beyond borders, beyond nations, Musk told world leaders during a global summit. We are all facing the same challenges, from climate change to space exploration. The only way to succeed is if we collaborate, if we combine our efforts and our resources for the common good. The reaction to Musk's call was mixed, of course. Some political leaders were quick to embrace his message, seeing it as a chance to reshape the global order. Others, entrenched in their own power struggles, were less inclined to listen. But Musk was undeterred. He knew that this would be a long and difficult battle. Rome wasn't built in a day, Musk said in a quiet moment with Rebecca and Emily. But we're building it, brick by brick. Space exploration had always been Musk's passion, but after the revelations of the conspiracy, his desire to send humanity beyond Earth became more urgent. It wasn't just about reaching Mars, it was about ensuring that humanity would survive in the long term. Earth was finite, and Musk knew that the only way to secure the future of the species was to make sure they had a backup plan. Space is the ultimate frontier, Musk told a crowd during the unveiling of SpaceX's next big mission. We're not just going to Mars for exploration, we're going there to stay. Mars will be humanity's second home. The mission was ambitious: a full-scale colony on Mars, equipped with everything needed to support life. It was no longer a pipe dream, Musk had the resources, the technology, and the drive to make it happen. He also knew that the success of this project would depend on global collaboration, not just technological expertise. I can't do this alone, Musk said. It's going to take the best minds from around the world working together. We're going to need more than just rockets, we're going to need the collaboration of nations, industries, and individuals who believe in this future. The Mars Colony project was launched with much fanfare, but behind the scenes, Musk was working on another plan, one that would lay the groundwork for space exploration beyond Mars. He envisioned a network of space stations, asteroid mining operations, and interplanetary travel routes that would make humanity a true spacefaring civilization. But there were still obstacles to overcome. The old powers that had tried to suppress Musk's rise to prominence were still active in the shadows, hoping to derail his vision. However, Musk had learned from his past struggles. This time, he wasn't going to let anyone stand in his way. Musk's third focus was on revolutionizing healthcare. He had already made waves with his companies like Neuralink, which had developed technology that could connect the human brain to machines. But now, Musk was pushing for a new revolution in healthcare, using artificial intelligence to make healthcare not just more efficient, but more accessible for everyone. AI will be the key to solving some of humanity's most pressing challenges, Musk said during a presentation about his new healthcare initiative. Imagine a world where diseases are diagnosed and treated before they even manifest. Imagine a healthcare system where everyone has access to the best care, no matter where they live. The project, called Health 2.0, was aimed at developing AI-driven medical solutions that could detect, diagnose, and treat a wide range of conditions with unprecedented precision. But Musk didn't stop there. He also had a vision of democratizing healthcare, making it available to all, regardless of income or location. We're not just building technology, Musk explained. We're building a system that will ensure everyone has the chance to live a healthy, fulfilling life. The early stages of Health 2.0 had already shown promising results, with AI-based diagnostic tools helping doctors make faster and more accurate diagnoses. But Musk knew this was just the beginning. His long-term goal was nothing short of revolutionizing the entire healthcare system. As Musk looked toward the future, he knew that the challenges were far from over. There would be more battles, more obstacles, and more naysayers. But he was ready for them. He had faced adversity before and come out stronger on the other side. This time, however, he wasn't fighting for personal gain. He was fighting for something bigger, for the future of humanity. The system may have tried to break us, Musk said at a final press conference, but it didn't. And now, we have a chance to rebuild, to create a future that works for everyone. It's not going to be easy, but it's worth fighting for. Rebecca and Emily, who had stood by him through it all, shared a look of quiet pride. They had seen Musk's journey from the beginning, his rise, his fall, and his triumphant return. They had helped him navigate the rough waters, and now, they were ready to take on the next chapter of the journey together. The future is ours to build, Emily said softly, her eyes bright with determination. And so, Musk's journey continued, not just as a businessman, but as a leader, a visionary, and a man who had reshaped the world. The road ahead was uncertain, but with his determination, the truth on his side, and a world that was finally beginning to see the possibilities, there was no limit to what he and his team could accomplish. Elon Musk stood on the balcony of his newly built headquarters, overlooking a world that had radically transformed. The fight for the future, the battle against corruption, and the fight to unshackle humanity from its old limitations had been long and grueling. But now, it was over. The world had changed, the people were awakening to their own potential, and Musk was leading the charge into a new era, one that was not just about survival but about thriving on a galactic scale. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the horizon. Musk often found himself staring at moments like these, reflecting on how far he had come, and yet, how much farther there was still to go. His eyes were no longer just on Earth. The stars above called to him, not as distant dots in the sky but as destinations for humanity. Musk had always believed that the future of humanity lay beyond the confines of Earth. For years, SpaceX had been preparing the groundwork for humanity's first steps on Mars. But now, the vision had expanded far beyond just Mars. The time had come to start planning for an interplanetary civilization, a world in which humanity was no longer bound to a single planet, and where space stations, asteroid mining, and even colonies on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn were becoming increasingly realistic. The future is not just on Mars, Musk said in a groundbreaking announcement to the world. The future is everywhere. It's time we stop thinking of ourselves as Earthlings. We are a species of explorers, of builders, of dreamers. And the universe is waiting. The Galactic Expansion Project was officially launched. Musk's plan involved not just Mars but a network of space stations across the solar system, connected by a robust system of interplanetary travel. Musk had always believed that humanity's greatest hope for survival lay in becoming a multiplanetary species. Now, it wasn't just a dream, it was on the verge of becoming reality. To start, SpaceX would establish a permanent colony on Mars, capable of self-sustaining life. This would lay the groundwork for future missions to other celestial bodies, as well as space stations in orbit around Earth and the Moon. The dream of space travel was no longer limited to the rich or the elite. With the right technology and infrastructure, the stars were within reach for everyone. Musk's focus wasn't just on technological advancements. He had always said that the future of humanity depended not just on the inventions of a few, but on the collective will of the people. He had spent years working to create a system of global cooperation, and now, the first real test of that vision was about to unfold. Space exploration is not the future of a few nations or corporations, Musk said. It is the future of humanity. And if we are going to succeed, we must work together as one species, one global community. The challenges we face are universal. Our solutions must be universal as well. It was an audacious proposal, and not everyone was on board. The old powers, the governments, the corporations, and the entrenched elites, were still resistant. The change Musk was advocating for was as much about shifting human consciousness as it was about technological progress. And that, Musk knew, was the hardest part. But the people were starting to listen. The Future Project, which had started as a movement to expose corporate corruption, had now evolved into something much more. It had become a global call for transformation, a movement that united people not just in their desire for a better future, but in their belief that they could build that future together. Musk's commitment to sustainability had been a cornerstone of his work for years. With his companies, Tesla and SolarCity, he had already begun to revolutionize how the world used energy. But now, Musk was pushing the boundaries further. The next step in his vision was the solar revolution, a global effort to harness the power of the sun and make renewable energy the dominant force in the world. We have the technology, Musk said, and we have the will. Now it's time to make it happen. The energy revolution starts with the sun. If we can power our cities, our factories, our homes, and even our space colonies using solar energy, we will have a future that is both sustainable and limitless. To make this vision a reality, Musk proposed the construction of massive solar arrays in space, giant panels orbiting the Earth, harvesting energy that could be beamed back down to power the world. The project was ambitious and risky, but the potential rewards were enormous. With renewable energy, Musk believed that the need for fossil fuels could be eliminated, and humanity could embark on a future free from environmental destruction. Musk's Neuralink project had already made huge strides in connecting the human brain to machines. But the real vision for Neuralink wasn't just about curing diseases or improving cognitive function. Musk had a much bigger idea in mind: human enhancement. The goal was to develop neural interfaces that would allow humans to communicate instantly, access information from the cloud, and even upload their consciousness into machines. It was a concept that bordered on science fiction, but for Musk, it was the next logical step in human evolution. We are entering an age where the boundary between man and machine will no longer exist, Musk explained. Neuralink is just the beginning. Imagine a world where knowledge isn't just something you learn, it's something you experience. A world where we can solve the greatest challenges of the human mind and transcend our biological limits. Musk's vision for the future was one where humans were no longer bound by their physical limitations. Through Neuralink and similar advancements, humans could become more than just people, they could become super-intelligent beings, capable of solving the problems that had long seemed insurmountable. As Musk's plans for space exploration gained momentum, so did his efforts to establish a new era of space diplomacy. The international cooperation needed to make his vision of a multiplanetary species a reality required more than just technological collaboration. It required a new approach to governance, one that could transcend the old rivalries and geopolitical tensions that had long defined human history. Musk was determined that space exploration would not be marred by the same mistakes that had plagued Earth's history. He advocated for the creation of a space federation, a governing body composed of representatives from every nation, focused on ensuring peace and cooperation in space. The goal was to prevent conflicts over resources, territory, and power, and to ensure that humanity's expansion into the stars was done in a way that benefited everyone. Space is too vast for conflict, Musk said. If we are going to succeed as a species, we have to learn to work together, across borders, across cultures, across the stars. As Musk's work in space, energy, and human enhancement took shape, one thing was clear: his legacy was not just about technology. It was about humanity itself. His vision for the future wasn't just about rockets and AI, it was about creating a world where humanity could flourish, where technology was a tool for empowerment, and where people had the freedom to pursue their highest potential. Musk had already reshaped the world, but now, he was shaping the future of humanity itself. His work was paving the way for an era of interplanetary exploration, energy abundance, and human evolution. But the greatest accomplishment was perhaps the shift in human consciousness, the realization that the future was not something that happened to them, but something they could create together. As he looked up at the stars once more, Musk smiled. The road ahead was uncertain, full of challenges and unknowns. But he knew one thing for sure: humanity's journey had only just begun. The story of Elon Musk is far from over. As humanity stands on the brink of its greatest leap yet, the question remains: will we rise to the challenge, or will we falter? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: the future is ours to shape. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?